So, what was the training like at McCall?
It was good, I thought. I loved it. The harder it was physically, the better I liked it.
Yeah.
It was good, and of course we were close to the largest wilderness area in the country at the time there, Chamberlain area there, and so we got to jump into those areas as well as all those fires along Salmon River.
You had a lot of fires on the Salmon.
Yeah, we did. Lost Packer Fire, the largest jumper unit at that time, over 100 and some jumpers, a lot of them from Missoula. Missoula wasn't doing that much even the next summers compared to McCall. We had fires down there.
What was that Lost Packer fire? I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it was north of, well, you know, as you go through Norfolk and go down the river there, by jet boat, it was one of those streams going up to the north. Not as far as Dixie or any of that area there. It was closer to Norfolk, about halfway between there. It was about 60 miles from Norfolk, I think, from the river there. So it was, and it blew up, you know, and we were there because we were the second plane load. Missoula was the first one on it, and we were the second. And I knew a lot of the Missoula guys because I went to school with them. Connie Orr, I don't know if you knew Connie Orr or any of those guys. Ortley was a foreman at the time, Missoula. He was on that fire, was one of the head foremen, and it was a good fire.
Who were some of the overhead on a fire that big?
Well, Ortley, I'm just trying to think who was on that fire. I didn't recognize a lot of them because I didn't know any of them at that time, other than if they went to college.
Yeah.
And so there were some guys there, as I say, Connie Orr he became a veterinarian there in Missoula for a number of years.
Well, you didn't have any trouble jumping out of an airplane, I take it. It was, and it's the whole life kind of suited you. Is that it?
What's that?
The Smokejumper life is what you expected. It suited you.
Yes, yeah, that was a great life, especially those two-man fires. Well, even a lot of them, because once we got on fire with Paper Legs Pearson, we got all the old stories. And he was always telling us our D-rings were going to snap someday if we didn't watch it. So when the chute opens, and in World War II, that's what happened a lot of times because there were so many jumpers. There were a lot of times as D-rings would crystallize. It happened maybe once or twice in history, probably, but he used it against us all the time. And,
was Miles Johnson there?
Who?
Miles Johnson, Shep's brother.
He could have been. There were a lot of guys. I'm just trying to recall so many of them. It's been so long ago now. I've lost track. I was just trying to think. Spence Miller was famous at the time, kind of a wild guy, but he'd come in drunk in the barracks at night and shoot out the lights with his pistol, and being drunk at the time. One guy was shooting through the barracks door with a .45 pistol right next to my bed, and of course I had been just back from Korea, and I just got up and raked him over the coals to where he sobered up right there. I mean, I was ready to, I wasn't going to kill him, but I was ready to let him have it to the point. And anyway, because one of our guys was sleeping outside because it was hot that night, and he was sleeping outside of the barracks there down there in McCall. And he was, anyway, we had a lot of those incidents, you know, late at night, about 2 in the morning.
Well, how did it work now when Paper Legs and Shep and Ray Beasley and there was a bunch of guys, 5 or 6 left for the CIA. Do you remember any of that when they left? How that happened, that they just transferred over to the Central Intelligence Agency? Do you remember any of that?
Well, course, I started jumping up in Missoula in '61, and you know, that was even before, that was when everything was just getting started with the CIA situation. But I knew some guys from Missoula, especially then, and of course, Paper Legs was over there with the CIA, and he trained a lot of them over there.
Well, were you ever approached to do that with your record?
No, because I was only in Missoula 2 years there. And of course, I was married at the time, so I was rigging most of the time there in Missoula. And I didn't get to know a lot of the Missoula guys because I wasn't in the barracks. The only time I was when they called me out on a fire to get to know guys, unless they came into the shop there or were rigging, in the rigging area in the loft. And so, you know, a lot of the guys I knew, of course, Hal Samsel, and a lot of the Missoula guys I got to know pretty well, because especially overhead guys.
Well, how'd that loft work in '61? Why don't you describe how the whole rigging operation worked in 1961?
Well, I don't know as it's much different today. I haven't been over there to watch them go through it, but the chutes were 28 footers at that time, candy stripers, and we of course set up, and Jack Nash was the head man, and Al Kramer were head of the loft at that time. And it didn't take much to snap us in on getting those chutes packed and folded and so on. It was good training, and in the loft there is same thing, you know, checking the chutes for holes and tears and so on and so forth. A buddy of mine, Ted Nyquist, we were roommates in college and ran track together, and we competed against each other and with the Grizzlies track team there. And he was in the loft as well at that time, along with Nelson, and there was another fellow there. Well, there was a lot of them. McPherson was in the loft.
Well, when you were working the loft, did you rotate on the jump list or stay at the top?
Oh yeah, we rotated.
Same as everybody else.
Yeah. We jumped up on, there was a fire in Wild Horse Island, and it happened to be, I was just going in to eat lunch, and they had steak that day, big plate, you know, those great big, I don't know whether they were T-bones or whatever. I was just starting to saw in on one of those and have a bite. And fire call, and the first guy they mentioned was Travis. And I thought, well, I'll take this one bite. I had to leave that steak alone. I didn't even get to eat lunch. And so that's the way it worked there. And so I had some coffee, and going up there, the plane ride, it was at noon and it was hot, and so the air was like this. It was up and down all the time. So I was getting sick because the coffee was bouncing up and down on my body. And when we got there, circled and circled around, they jumped the first group, and then I was in the second group, and there was a bunch of deer right in front of me as I was coming down, and they were running. Well, I was concentrating on the deer and not on my landing, and so there happened to be a rock right where I landed, and my right foot hit there and twisted my ankle on that fire. So, and I couldn't even walk at the time. The thing swollen up. It was getting pretty well festered there with swelling, and they sent me down to the lake to soak it while they fought the fire on Wild Horse Island. And then they shipped me out back to the base by some guy with a motorboat there. He picked me up and took me. So I had the best deal on the fire. I didn't get any overtime, but anyway.
So you jumped in 62 also?
Yeah, 62 and 3, I think it was there.
In Missoula. And then, so why did the jumping end? What happened? You were married, but that didn't change your life. What changed in your life that you got out of smoke jumping?
In Missoula?
Or wherever? Yeah.
Well, it just, I don't know. It was just a good life. I enjoyed just camping out on those ridges in the summertime and looking up at the stars and the small fires, the ones you had, you know, they were just an acre fire or something, you know, the crew could put them out. We were doing something and the walkouts were great, unless they were 20 miles long, because the packs were pretty heavy. And so it was a great life, a great association with a lot of guys, and it was just a pleasant work climate is what I looked at as, and just what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the mountains, I wanted to be amongst the trees, and I got that. I had to jump out of the airplane to do it for the most part, but that was a great part of it too. So.
Well, what did you end up doing? I mean, you gradually started doing something else. What was it in your life?
Well, I taught school after I graduated. My first job was in 1958 in Corvallis. There were 25 guys who applied for the job. It was assistant football and basketball coach, and also I had to teach junior or high school history and social studies. I taught social studies and psychology and U.S. history, and I think I even had world history in there too. So it was just what I wanted to be, and I was in the mountain area as well, and close to Missoula as well as I was down there. And then from there, my paycheck was only $200 a month after they took out on it. So I thought, well, this is not the life. So I went to Missoula, looked around, and maybe I ought to sell real estate. Missoula was growing at the time. So I quit the job at Corvallis. I had misgivings because I liked it down there, but I thought, man,